All right. Good morning, members of council and staff and members of the public. Welcome to Committee of the Whole meeting of Council for April 2nd, 2024. And before we move to the approval of the agenda, I'd like to call on the Deputy Mayor to do the land acknowledgement.
Thank you. Good morning. I would like to acknowledge that Wolfville is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. And as such, ask that we conduct our business with the 7 sacred teachings in mind: truth, honesty, love, courage, respect, wisdom, and humility.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And going to do the approval of the agenda. Just before we call for a motion, we're going to add an item, an in-camera at the end of Committee of the Whole under MGA Section 22E, contract negotiation. So with that, I don't know if there are any other additions from staff or seeing none. Deputy Mayor.
I would like to move the approval of the agenda for April 2nd, 2024.
Could I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Are there any comments, additions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That's passed unanimously. And 2 sets of minutes, Committee of the Whole minutes of March 5th, 2024.
I would like to move the approval of the minutes of the Committee of Whole minutes, March 5th, 2024.
A seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Palmater. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Those are also passed unanimously. And Special Committee of the Whole minutes related to the budget, version 3, March 19th, 2024.
And I would like to move that the minutes from the Special Committee of the Whole budget version number 3 from March 19, 2024 be approved.
Thank you. And seconder, please.
Second those.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Are any errors or omissions? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Those are also passed unanimously. We have 2 presentations today. The first presentation is Matthew Code and Michaela Ogilvie from East Kings Community. Michaela, I guess you are the East Kings Community Health Coordinator. That's what's on my sheet. Maybe Matthew, you are. If you'd like to come up to whoever's presenting to the mic, I think that our clerk has shown you. And I would ask you to keep your presentation to 15 minutes max, and then we'll open it to council for any questions. Thank you. Whenever you're ready, Matthew.
All right. Good morning. This is my first time speaking at council, so this is exciting. So I am not the coordinator of the East Kings Community Health Board. I am a volunteer. And so my name is Matthew Code. I live here in Wolfville. And I'm actually a student at Acadia and a father of 2 boys. So that's right. Click it. Okay. So what are community health boards? So community health boards are groups of community volunteers who work together to impact the social determinants of health. The resources available in communities that keep us all healthy. Keeping our community healthy takes much more than doctors. It takes equitable access for all the things that keep us healthy and prevent illness. When we take action to improve resources for a healthy life, we take upstream action. We have a short video to show you on upstream action work, which is what the community health boards are focused on. And from Give me, yeah, that'd be great. Hopefully it'll work. If not, then I'll ad lib. There we go.
A flailing, drowning child comes floating by. Without thinking, you dive in, grab the child, and swim to shore. Before you can recover, another child comes floating by. So you dive in and rescue her as well. Then another child drifts into safety, and another, and another. Eventually, hopefully, some wise person will ask, who keeps chucking these kids in the river? And they'll head upstream to find out. Every time we have to clean up environmental disaster, every time a young person winds up in jail, every time people have to take medications to make up for the fact that they couldn't afford good food, we're suffering from the results of downstream thinking. Thinking upstream means making smarter decisions about what kind of country we want. What better goal could Canada have than creating the conditions for all people to enjoy true health and experience physical, mental, and social well-being? It's the best way to measure our success. And upstream thinking is the way we get there. Help us make the mainstream look upstream. Visit us at thinkupstream.net to find out more.
Do you help me get back to PowerPoint? Thank you. So. Excellent. So every 5 years, the CHBs in the Western Zone do a zone-wide survey to find out what people think are needed to create healthy communities. Community health boards also do engagements in their unique communities to hear the voices missed by a survey. This is our health plan developed in 2019 and identified food security, housing, recreation and wellness, and community connections as critical areas where work needs to be done. These 4 areas are all upstream social determinants of health. In 2019, we heard that people have challenges with availability and access to healthy living, recreation, and wellness programs in our communities. We have a lot of folks who do not feel included in our community, and more needs to be done to welcome them and inform them of what services and groups are available and how they can access them. In 2019, we heard that people have challenges with availability and access to healthy living, recreation, and wellness programs in our communities. Oh, did I just read that twice? I'm so sorry. Here we go. Let's try this again. I thought that was the same. We heard that people have challenges with availability and access to healthy living, recreation, and wellness programs in their communities. We need more recreational facilities which are affordable or funded programs which allow low income to be active without breaking their pocketbook. Okay. We heard people have difficulty accessing healthy food because of cost, availability, transportation, and lack of food skills or knowledge. If we had school healthy eating policies in all schools in collaboration between local growers, school programs, parents, teachers, and staff, we could have free breakfast and affordable salad bar buffet that supports local farmers in school gardens. We heard that people experience a variety of issues finding or maintaining safe, affordable, appropriate housing. With kids, it's hard. Some landlords won't take kids. Very hard time getting a place. I looked at a place that had 3 or 4 bedrooms and they said no small kids. All the things we heard from our community led to a Western Zone community health plan being developed that focus on these 4 community health priorities: food security, housing, community connection, and recreation and wellness. So what do we do with our community health plan? We use what we have heard to give grants to organizations for projects that improve our priority areas. We advocate for healthy public policy and govern action, and we form partnerships with community organizations to host events, create projects, and bring people together to talk about the work on the social determinants of health. Since 2019, East Kings Community Health Board has given over $54,000 in wellness funds to projects in the town of Wolfville or accessible to Wolfville residents. These projects have included those run by the town itself. For example, the Acadia Wolfville Active Kids Exercise Program. They've also included projects run by the community organization like Wolfville's Farmers Market, the Caravan Theater, Acadia Student Union, and the Wolfville Community Oven. East Kings Community Health Board provided a significant amount of funds in your community to increase health for all. So right now, the community health boards across the province are developing the newest 2024 community health plan. We have done engagements with our community members and sent out a survey across the zone to hear what health priorities are important to our communities. The plan is set to come out later this year. And what's next? So we hope to come back following the October 2024 election to meet Wolfville's new council, present our new 2024 health plan to them, and hear how they plan to act on our community's priorities, and then hopefully come back annually to share what we've been up to and hear how the council has integrated into their work what community has said is most important to them. Thank you for having us today. Any questions? And if not, there is an email at the bottom there that you can send any other questions.
Thank you, Matthew. If you could just stay there, I'm going to open it up, and the deputy mayor seems to have her light on. So
I seem to, and I do. Good morning. Thank you
Morning.
for your presentation. I was interested in the 4 priorities. How does a health board work on the obvious housing issues that we have? Is there anything that you've been able to achieve since 2019?
That's a great question. I joined the board just last year. So Michaela might be able to speak a little bit more to this, but I know that recently in Kentville, we were able to go and do some advocacy work with the pallet housing. But yeah, no, since 2019, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Michaela, if you could, maybe if you come up and sit beside Matthew, only because we need the mic for the people in the public to hear.
Sure. Yeah, so Matthew is right that we were part of advocacy for the pallet community, Tiny Meadows and Kentville. East Kings CHB specifically also is a participating member in Homeless No More. So that organization partners with Acadia University to publish some really good research on homelessness in our community. And they also support homelessness and housing security organizations kind of across the valley to develop housing that's accessible and affordable, and also advocate for more resources for folks who are currently unhoused. So that's one of the ways that we participate, but we also have done a lot of advocacy for healthy public policy in connection to accessibility to affordable housing. So we never do things alone. We always do things in partnership with other kind of organizations or groups in community that are doing the work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not sure who was first, Councillor Palmer.
Sure, thank you. Somebody that struck a chord when you were talking there. Do you know if all the schools in our district here now provide lunches or at least breakfasts or something? Are they all have that now? Do you know?
No, they don't. But there has been, I'm sure as you all know, some recent provincial and federal funding investment in national school food programs. So hopefully we will see all schools do that soon. And CHBs have really been involved in advocacy work through Kings County Community Food Council in connection to school food as well. So hopefully soon, but not right now.
Thank you.
Councillor Madeira Voss.
Thank you, Mayor Donovan. Thank you for your report. I think you've raised some very important issues and confirmed that these issues are important and very broad based. I'm just wondering, I'm curious to read is there a report related to the results of your survey? Because I'd be interested in kind of reading that further, or
Yeah,
if that's
so
available.
the Western Zone Community Health Plan, you saw the cover of it in Matthew's presentation, but it is a full report. And so it's available on our website, but I can also send it off to Laura to provide directly to council as kind of like a PDF document.
Yeah, that would be appreciated.
Sure.
Thank you.
Councillor McKay.
Thank you. Yes, thanks for the report. It's a great jumping point for us, for sure. I too was going to ask about the report. Where are you physically located? Do you have an office that's here in town?
No, so our community health board alternates meeting in Kentville and Wolfville. My office personally, kind of as a support, is in Berwick because I support all of King County, so I'm in the middle, but that's just me. The board itself, kind of we range from the edge of Wolfville to the edge of kind of like Kentville, beginning into Colebrook, so folks are coming from a diverse area, so we try to meet people wherever, kind of move around, so people can be able to access the meetings.
And your survey, has it been sent out? I personally didn't see it. I don't know if anyone else did. So I'm wondering where it was sent to. Is it completed? Can we help amplify, share it, to help you gather more information?
Yeah, so the survey itself has been completed, and it was sent out through our community partners to folks in community, and then also posted on Nova Scotia Health's social medias as well as ours. And we would have sent it to our community partners as well. So it has been completed. But yeah, I appreciate the offer to share, but it's done now.
Okay, well, next time maybe. Yeah, and I just to follow up to Councilor Palmer's, there was federal funding to open up all of the school lunches. However, somewhere it's held up in our provincial governments. That's something we can advocate for because there is funding there. We just need to enable it into our schools.
Didn't that I just saw that this morning, that there's $1 billion for
Yeah,
across
a lot.
Canada.
Yeah.
Question, I was invited and spoke at Community Health Board conference in this past fall or the year before. And I must admit, I was not aware until I was approached by, I think, the person who's your Western regional coordinator, was not aware. So that was interesting. There's a group that meets informally in Wolfville that is dealing with housing. Is that something that if we were to send out an invite, that is that an area that you would have some resources or connections that might be helpful for that group?
Yeah, so we certainly have connections. I think it would depend on kind of what the actions that group takes are, because we contribute in more upstream work, kind of as mentioned in the video, so we don't get involved with direct service provision or supporting individual folks or navigating support for individual folks. So we definitely have lots of connections that could be shared, like to other.
Probably just interesting to know
Yeah.
what you do, because I think that's some of the concerns, right there, Lindy? All right, thank you so much. And yes, if you could send your report maybe to Laura, then she can distribute it. Are there any other questions? Thank you so much, Matthew and Michaela. And our next presentation is Dr. Stephen Schneider, who's going to present on his Community Safety Office final report and recommendations. I think you know the drill, Stephen. Again, if you could keep your presentation to 15 minutes. I do have a timer, and then council can have 5 or 10 minutes to ask questions. So whenever you're ready to start.
Thank you very much. Well, there's certainly, thank you, Council. There's certainly a lot of synergy between the previous presentation and what I'm proposing, because it is very much focused on upstream preventative work. So given the shortage of time, I'm going to just jump right into my recommendations. And in a nutshell, the recommendations of my report starts with establishing a nonprofit, chartering a nonprofit society as the legal organizational framework. I'm proposing hiring of 3 positions, community safety and crime prevention coordinator, social development and wellness coordinator, and a community navigator. Excuse me, and this would be phased in over a 5-year pilot project. So starting with the principles of this project, I mean, the first and foremost is what was indicated in the previous presentation, which is really an upstream approach, and that is prevention. And the whole model is premised on a proactive preventative approach, and to ensure risk factors do not become actual harms or crisis situations. Problem-oriented means making sure that your solutions are commensurate with the nature and scope of the problem. So currently, whether you're talking about, especially with community safety, basically law enforcement has one approach and one approach only. Problem-oriented approach is really about trying to make sure that the solution addresses the problem, including root causes, often working outside the criminal justice system. Partnerships is a team approach. Takes a village to raise a child. There are a lot of resources locally, but we tend to work in silos. And so there's a very much an importance of a partnership-based approach, multi-stakeholder approach, which is realized through the working groups. It's a community-based approach in the sense that that we're mobilizing local resources, including community members, and it's comprehensive. If you look at the under the methods, so it's strategic and tactical, it's strategic planning, it's also addressing individual cases, a whole community approach. Interventions are delivered at the population level or community level, whether that's public education programs or neighborhood watch programs. But at the same time, the model also accommodates individual services for high-risk individuals. So you're working both at the community level, population level, but also delivering resources directly to those most at risk. And again, a number of theoretical or disciplinary models have influenced this, the two most important being crime prevention and public health. But this approach is also informed by child development, community development, restorative justice, social justice, trauma-informed approaches. So as I mentioned, one of the most important stages is, what is the constitution and governance of this model? And what I'm suggesting is chartering a nonprofit society, what I would call the Wolfville Community Safety and Wellness Society. So this provides a legal and organizational framework. It also allows this entity to work at arm's length from all the key stakeholders. And it also provides a mechanism for fundraising, whether it's applying for grants from provincial federal governments or private foundations, or actually getting out in the community and doing fundraising itself. So this is what I see as a fairly cost-effective approach. So it's not costing the stakeholders a lot of money. So governed by a board of directors, board would include the town, Acadia, the student union, RCMP, provincial government, Business Development Corporation. There should be representation of the community, and there should be really strong representation of youth as well, because a lot of what we're talking about here in programming is directed at youth, from children to adolescents to Acadia students. So on top of the broad governance and leadership mandate, again, the board would be mandated to do strategic planning, fundraising, government relations and public policy, in particular working with the provincial government. And a lot of these duties would be supported by the proposed coordinators. So the first staffing position that I was recommending is what's called the Community Safety and Crime Prevention Coordinator. Some of the potential, and really, they're in support of the working group, which I'll talk about next. They work in obvious coordination with one another. Some of the potential issues to address through this working group would be violence against women and girls, alcohol-related problems, bylaw infractions, pedestrian safety. And the focus here really is on what we call situational crime prevention, which is basically reducing the opportunities for crimes and other nuisance problems to occur in a particular time and place. So it's not about addressing root causes. And really, I think this most directly addresses why you commissioned me to do this study as a complement or an alternative to traditional policing. So the coordinator would be involved in doing safety audits, working with residents on how to implement crime prevention, personal safety measures, implementing CPTED, which is safe design of public spaces, perhaps monitoring the CTV cameras, developing, coordinating the alcohol strategy. It also involves community crime prevention, which is mobilizing community members, which is absolutely essential. Promoting social cohesion and formal social control, which is central to any kind of community crime prevention. It also would entail implementing neighborhood watch programs and what I call multi-residential safety and wellness programs, which is working with obviously the multi-residential owners. And there'd be a strong, not just community policing, but this would involve bylaw enforcement and also traditional criminal law enforcement as well. And I also envision that your bylaw enforcement officers would actually do more in the field of crime prevention. So expanding their duties, maybe having 2 full-time bylaw compliance officers where they can do this crime prevention work, do crime safety audits, get out there and work in the community. So the working group would basically build on the group that's in place now that I think is the RCMP in the town and some representatives of Acadia. So you expand the mandate in terms of the problem issues being addressed and also expand it in terms of the stakeholders. So you would include also planning department and engineering to address some of the SEPTED issues, the library. You would include, say, the sexual violence response and education coordinator from Acadia, ASU, if possible, Department of Justice, and a whole range of other key stakeholders. So it's expanding the existing group based on the issues addressed, but also the membership. So the next position I'm suggesting is the social development and wellness coordinator. And some of the key issues that we addressed here would be poverty, financial insecurity, at-risk children and youth, mental health addictions, marginalized groups, affordable housing, homelessness, and at-risk Acadia students. And this is really about addressing social development and wellness issues in and of themselves. But while you're addressing those issues, you're also addressing the social determinants of community safety issues. And so the 2 coordinator positions and the 2 working groups are to work in concert. One just addresses, tries to minimize crime and nuisance problems from taking place in a particular time and place, while this approach addresses root causes. So they're complementary in the sense. And again, a lot of focus needs to be on focusing on at-risk children and youth. I think my report goes into great depth of many of the unprecedented risk factors and challenges that are facing young people today, including Acadia students. And these programs include everything from parenting programs to an enriched pre-primary program at Wolfville School, such as Head Start, after-school programs for kids, tutoring mentoring programs, referrals to Big Brothers Big Sisters. There's also working with the Canadian Mental Health Association through Project Hope, which has the coordinated access system for housing, trusteeship services, which is emergency funding for families in crisis. And so the recommended working group here would, again, be all those agencies that have a very strong focus on social development, child development, community development, mental health. So in my report, Acadia University, really could take a lead because they have the resources and the expertise, whether it's the MED counseling program, clinical psychology, community development. But again, this is really about addressing these social development and wellness problems in and of themselves. But by doing so, you're also addressing the social determinants and root causes of community safety issues. So the mission of the working groups is really taking a public health approach. Again, a lot of synergy with the previous presentation. Public health is a very comprehensive way of community problem solving. It is very appropriate here because I addressed in my report, the mental health crisis is really the #1 issue facing the town. And so public health approach is very conducive, but the public health approach is increasingly being applied to violence against women, at-risk youth. So it's very adaptable to addressing a whole range of social problems. So it's a very comprehensive approach from conducting research. What are the scope and nature of the problems? What are the resources we need? Strategic planning, develop programs with a heavy emphasis on prevention, public education campaigns, community engagement, community building. So my report very much has a very heavy emphasis on the use of a public health approach. I won't get into great detail, but the coordinator, but they were really there to support the working group, from chairing and coordinating the working group meetings to helping facilitate strategic planning, implementing the working group recommendations, community organizing. And one thing I found in my research was there certainly has been some great efforts to get these multi-stakeholder groups going, but a lot of them have imploded or sort of petered out. And one of the reasons is that there's no sort of full-time position to be able to coordinate and keep them going. And so a key role of the coordinator would be coordinating these working groups. So maximizing the productivity of these groups, chairing the meetings, providing support, capacity building within the group. So it's really about having a full-time anchor that's able to keep these groups going, making sure they're productive. Because everyone on these working groups are busy with their full-time jobs, so there needs to be that support for these working groups. And that would be a main role of the coordinators. So the third position would be a community navigator, and this was informed by a number of current positions. So I know a lot of you in council referred to kind of the community navigator ambassador in the town and gown context. So that informed this position. The community crisis navigator with Kentfield Police was certainly an inspiration. The community program officer with Annapolis County RCMP, which very much focus on youth and youth programming. So all of these sort of coalesce in the position I'm recommending. And the important thing to note here is that it's about referral. So the community navigator is it's a risk-based approach where you identify individuals at risk and then try to provide them with the resources they need so the risk factors don't become full-blown crisis. So it's about referring at-risk individuals to the most appropriate resources, helping them navigate complex systems, advocating and supporting individuals through the process. But there's also a non-risk-based approach as well. So doing outreach with youth, doing perhaps drug and substance abuse education, providing services to Acadia students off campus, settlement and housing services. But certainly a significant part of this would be a risk-based approach, working with the most at-risk individuals. So as I mentioned, this is fairly ambitious, and I obviously don't envision it all to be implemented in 1 year. I envision this as a 5-year pilot project. And I see the very first phase actually being creating and funding this community navigator position. This is, I think, is probably the most important position. It's boots on the ground. You have a lot of at-risk individuals out there not getting the services they need. It's a fairly straightforward position. You've got some precedent sent in Kentville and Annapolis County. And the community navigator position can also, in their work, identify what the key problems are in the community. So in Kentville, it's about 80% mental health calls for service. Is that the same in Wolfville? By doing that work, we are able to get a good handle on what are the key issues that need to be addressed in subsequent phases. So the next phase is what I call organizational planning and structural development. That's setting up the nonprofit charitable organization, which would include a steering committee, which would morph into a board of governors. Then the community safety and crime prevention initiative. So hiring a community safety coordinator, getting that working group together. The next is social development wellness initiative, and then assessing modifying options. And as you note in my report, there certainly is a number of other long-term options that could be considered that have been effected in other jurisdictions. But I'll just leave it at that and take any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you. You did very well.
Thank you.
Justin.
Did I just come in time?
Yeah,
Getting an
under-
academic to speak within 15 minutes.
you got 40 seconds if you want to keep talking.
Thank you.
All right, I will, thank you. Open it up, Counselor Ingham.
Thank you. That 15 minutes went by quickly. Your report was extremely thorough, more so than I would have had expected. I think when council talked about this, we were talking more about a community navigator, and then so the other positions added too. So I'm seeing the way you're looking down the road, and I see how the 5-year pilot project. But there is, at the end of your report, there are 2 more positions that you would add under this umbrella, like an office manager and a director. So
That would be a long, if you want to go the route of actually setting up a physical brick and mortar storefront office, then those would be the positions. So those are seen as more long-term.
Yeah. So I mean, I read the report. I think all of us probably read it 2 or 3 times because it was, I kept describing it as intense. There's a lot of issues, not surprised of all the mental health issues and sexualized violence and the alcohol, all that. And I know it did focus on more of the younger generation. What did you find with the major mental health problems with the older generation around, and how can we help them too?
Sorry, I didn't.
Oh,
can you repeat
so
that?
you did focus a lot on the population, under 25,
Yeah.
I guess. So we do have different demographics in this town, one being a little bit older, myself included. What did you find in the elderly population for mental health, and how can we help them in this strategy that you've talked about?
Well, I wouldn't have enough data on seniors to be able to provide comprehensive answer to that, but certainly one of it is social isolation of seniors. that there tends to be even living in a small, relatively small community. And the other would be just sort of the inherent population conflicts in Wolfville, where you have a senior population and a very transient, young adult population. But much of my research really focuses on young people, because that is where the mental health challenges are so intense. That is, again, seniors tend to have a high level of fear, but they also tend to be the least victimized demographic out there, speaking in terms of community safety. Certainly there's levels of poverty among seniors, but if you can afford to live in Wolfville, either have money or you're impoverished from living in Wolfville. So there is some of the issues facing seniors, but I really didn't get a lot of data on circumstances facing seniors in Wolfville.
Yeah. Thank you. As we do look at the whole population, that is our job. So I look at the elderly population, and it's a large increase on, people being scammed, whether
Yeah.
through the internet
Sure.
or you're wanting to have renovations done or whatever. So I would see that as something that we should be looking at.
Absolutely.
Also, coming in, I need this renovation done and to take advantage, and how do we navigate that? So I do think that may be a little bit missing. Yeah.
Yeah. Certainly the situational crime prevention approach it would have a cyber victimization and fraud component as well. I mean, it needs to be tailored to each demographic group. But yeah, certainly my report overwhelmingly focused on young people, because because they're experiencing the most significant health wellness issues, and B, they're most at risk of future sort of antisocial criminal behavior, and an upstream approach is really focused on young people. Again, with that said, absolutely, there needs to be a focus on other populations, including seniors.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. And thank you for all the hard work. One thing I found, a comment that you made in the report that I found really interesting was about the absence of community groups. And I'm very conscious, having listened to the first presentation, that we lost a lot of cohesion over COVID. Things stopped. And then I was considering the fact that we used to have a block parent organization in Wolfville, which seemed to me to serve a lot of the concerns that you had noted. And I remember we had a block parent sign, and the only time it was ever called upon was some university student was being followed by a dog, and she was afraid. So she came to our house. But that group, as proactive as it is, didn't even before the pandemic, didn't survive. So I'm thinking, do the positions that you've envisioned help with the, I don't know, foundational groups like that might be operating in the community?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the main roles of the coordinator, is to provide some sustainability to both these working groups and any other groups, whether that is neighborhood watch or community groups, or the block watch. I mean, and certainly there can be, smaller groups that emerge from these working groups. Like I said, like a neighborhood watch program would be a program that could link with. So when I ran a crime prevention office in Vancouver, we had this working group, and then we had the neighborhood watch program, and many of our people on the working group were the community block, the neighborhood block captains. So these smaller groups fit into the broader groups that way. So to some extent, these working groups are kind of a catch-all, a very comprehensive approach to these two broad issues. But there's definitely so many other smaller community organizations that could feed in this, whether it's like I run the PALS program in the city for at-risk kids, an after tutoring program. There could be a subgroup just based on mental health. And all this would tie into the broader working group. I hate using the word subcommittee, or sub-working groups, but But yes, I think these broader working groups can definitely support a lot of more issue-specific community groups.
Right, so what your vision is kind of hierarchical in terms of leadership at the top and community groups under that kind of an umbrella?
To some extent, although I guess more lateral than horizontal than hierarchical, I guess, but I'm see what you're saying, Wendy, and yeah, to some extent, yeah. Yeah, I mean, as long as they're all working towards the same goal. But the groups that you mentioned are really, that's so important as a platform to mobilize community members, because the working groups will have a lot of professionals on there from Acadia or agencies, and there has to be community member representation. In fact, I recommend a community member unaffiliated with any key stakeholders to be the chair of these committees. But a lot of these smaller groups would be more, about community volunteers and representatives from the community, because it's so essential to get the community involved, as you well know.
Okay. Councillor Madeira Voss?
Thank you, Mayor Donovan, and thank you for your report. It's a lot of very worthwhile reading and very important references throughout. One of the things that I was trying to visualize as I was reading was the governance model. And I think it's very, very complex, the whole structure, because it would be drawing on representation from organizations that have their own governance structures. And I think, in my mind, I started to see a very bureaucratic, often is a negative word, I don't mean to in a negative way, but a very bureaucratic structure of how to work through all of those layers of policy making and decision making, and how that actually filters down into a workable on the street kind of action. So I had questions around that, and also questions around accountability, because when you have, even though it's a nonprofit society with its own board of directors, it is a private model that we would be creating. It's not private for profit, it's a nonprofit, but in terms of the decision making and the directions that they take, it's still a private entity that does not have the same level of public scrutiny, if you like, or public accountability that our bylaw enforcement staff does, for example. And so I had questions around that level of engagement, because, we have volunteers that would be actually on the ground involved in actions and actions that affect members of our community. But who ultimately are they accountable to? Because you could have, as I remember, when I lived in Toronto many years ago, we had this group called the Red Brigade that came, I don't know if you were aware of this, who were kind of a private military-like group that came up from the States that suddenly you'd see in the subway with their red berets on and presented themselves as added community in a city that at the time did not have a very high crime rate. And so I do have a lot of questions around the implementation of some of this, because a lot of the energy, a lot of the positions that have been highlighted really are dedicated to sorting through information and policies and ideas and all of that. And then, but at some point, something filters down into action. And how accountable are those who act, and who are they accountable to? And I think that for me, that was a piece that I couldn't get clearly from the report. And it is something that I would be concerned about, because I wouldn't want a private group, be they volunteers or whatever, to feel empowered to act in certain situations. I can think of, where I live, and we have a lot of student parties. And I wouldn't want anybody to feel that they had the authority to somehow go on site and start to intervene in ways that may or may not be appropriate, but maybe feel that it's their responsibility. So I think there are a lot of things that could turn into situations that may be difficult to manage. But again, it's lines of responsibility. Who manages those lines? Who determines those lines? And how would we, as a council, a municipal public institution in a way, manage a private entity that would be created through this society. So I don't know if I'm clear on what I'm saying,
No,
but
very clear, yeah.
these are just the questions that went through my mind.
No, and those are very good points, without a doubt. When I ran a crime prevention office in Vancouver, this is the model we used. So it was a charitable organization, and it had all the board of governors. Certainly but you're right, as you know, the accountability issue can be a bit vague. I mean, in our mission statement, you know, we were accountable to A, the community, that ultimately that's who we're accountable to, and B, to all the key stakeholders that make up the society. As far as, yes, and I mean, I'm amazed, and I'm actually, recommending committees and working groups because I know they are, problematic in themselves. Just trying to get them to work in a functional manner can be challenging, without a doubt, which is one of the reasons why, I recommended the coordinator positions. As far, really the working groups are very much operate at a strategic level. So they're there about, developing programs and having the coordinators implement the programs. And certainly I appreciate what you're saying about, someone from a nonprofit, going into the community and, what are the issues, indemnification and risks and things like that. And certainly in Vancouver, we were very cognizant of that. But certainly having that model established in this particular neighborhood called Mount Pleasant, where I worked, we had a close relationship with the police and all the other existing agencies that would give the coordinator the credibility to go in the community and say, well, I'm going to organize a neighborhood watch program, and I have the authority or the support of these agencies and town council. So, but I hear what you're saying as well. There's no perfect model, certainly. But, fundamental premise of this is this multi-stakeholder partnership approach. And the question is, well, how do you realize that without having one agency be dominant? So we can say, well, it could be a town subcommittee, for example. And I heard through research people saying, well, we don't want it to be, to get politicized, and you certainly don't want it in the RCMP. But these are all important issues, without a doubt, and ones we had to work through in Vancouver. And again, it's not a perfect model, but there's certainly a lot of precedence to this model. And I should say that in my model, it's really not that innovative, because everything I'm recommending has been done, and it's included in the slides, but not, I think, the report. Mine is just more comprehensive and perhaps more ambitious. So everything you've taught, I can give you the slides. There's a bunch of links to case studies I looked at that they call the hub model. And they all include this sort of governance approach. So you can learn from these existing models as well. But you raised some very good points, and without a doubt that those should be addressed.
Can I ask, so those models that you referred to, do they have like diagrams to show the structure?
They do.
Because that was one thing that I would have done, sort of that flow. And then you also mentioned, that there was community accountability. What does that look like?
Well, first and foremost, like I said, there should be strong community representation on the board of governors and on the working groups. Again, community members that are not affiliated with the town or Acadia or the RCMP. Should be a really strong youth representation. A lot of, a lot of the, say, programs that are implemented in the community should have strong volunteer representation. Again, ultimately, community members can be part of this nonprofit, and whether there are, like shareholder voting rights or anything like that, I'm not sure. But again, in Vancouver, it was really just making sure we had a number of community members on the board, that community member chaired the board, that they had strong say in the decisions, and that ultimately one of the roles of the community coordinator is to mobilize the local community and to get them involved in the activities. And that gives them a say in the activities. It's not just saying, directing them what to do, it's getting their input and having them control the process. But yes, again, accountability to the community is a challenging issue in of itself as well. And definitely something that needs to be navigated and thought out more in implementing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. I'd note that,
Sorry.
oh, sorry, Jody.
So I don't have a specific question for maybe Stephen, but I'm curious because we have clearly we care about our community because last month we had senior safety, we had the health board, we've got Stephen coming in, we've had Katie come in. And so we're talking about all of these little pieces of recreation, collaborative care, policing. And so I'm kind of was following up to Isabel because I'm not sure how we put all of the pieces of the puzzle back together and how we move. Because right now we've got a lot of balls in the air and how do we put something together to make it actually tangible and put some of this, really good research and information to work. So, we're doing citizen science, we're looking at the international program later, like we're doing a lot of things for community wellness, I think, all good things, but how do we tie them all together and maybe in a nice little bow? So I think our first stepping point was to get here to see if it's going to be in budget this year. So then my next question is, how do we take all of this and is it on someone's work plan job now to figure out how to meld all these things together? Because I see lots of different pieces and I had sort of the same struggle with everybody has a job, even if we're in that, governance board. And even though you go there and you represent no different than we do on King's Transit or any of those other ones, we go there and we represent that group, our group there and make a decision. But at the same time, they still have jobs here. So if it was our compliance, would that board be given direction to our compliance staff? Because they don't actually work for that board, they work for here. So things got a little bit muddy in my head. So I'm wondering how next to do that. And my last question was the Policing Service Review Committee given this report? And if not, it could be interesting to hear their feedback as well.
I'm sure they can. What I was going to suggest is that we have, I see Barb, we have this staff report. And so, and there is no motion, but certainly council could motion to direct staff to unpack this and answer Councillor McKay and Councillor Madeira Voss's comments. I think that is reasonable. Just because we don't have a motion doesn't mean we can't develop a motion. Barb, did you want to comment? I think those are both very good questions. It is. And you'll be back with your report, right?
That's right. Good morning through Mayor Donovan to Councillor McKay. Thank you for those questions. I had hoped to kind of open the presentation with a little bit of an overview of the information report. We didn't get to that because Stephen was very enthusiastic and focused on timing. I commend you for that. That's good. So this is an incredibly complex piece of work. I had the pleasure of spending some time with Ian Murray. Of course, Acadia was a co-funder of this piece of work. So we did have some really good dialogue and it's incredibly overwhelming. And I appreciate how much attention council members have paid to this. I will note that because council and Acadia have funded this, that's why it landed here first. It will go back to the Policing Review Committee as we kind of pull that back together in the months ahead. Of course, we've been going through our contract change with the RCMP, so a lot of other things to focus on there. So it will go back to them. This I felt was the best place to land it, to kind of get that preliminary sense. As I noted, I think in my message to council when I sent you out the report, this is the first report that you will receive. So a lot of the feedback that's coming today, which is why I encourage you to keep providing that feedback and keep asking those questions this morning, because Dr. Schneider will then come back with a more finalized report. We will be presenting at Acadia through the Town and Gown Committee as well. So what happens next is more time to unpack the complexities of this. I can tell you that over the past year, while Dr. Schneider was working on this report, through all of the conversations with Dr. Schneider, we kind of landed in a very different spot where we were starting to think about these very preventative approaches and how we could start to do better even before this piece of work landed. And so again, in the information report, kind of noting that staff are already starting to transition into role of navigator. We do it when people come into the building to join us for a meeting. We're trying to ensure that when people reach out from the community, we either get them an answer or we connect them with somebody who can provide that answer. It's just that sense of switching our roles a little bit. Through the work that Caden and Marin have been doing, again, in partnership with folks from Acadia and with exceptional support from the RCMP, we have an amazing opportunity to already start to bring this to life without the not-for-profit being established. So St. Patrick's Day weekend and Sheeton Cup weekend were prime examples of what happens when we take that proactive approach with multiple stakeholders, very realistically focused on a concern and also using data, right? We had the experience from previous years. And again, I should acknowledge the landlords worked with us very closely on those weekends also. And we had good outcomes because I don't think council had a lot of interruptions during both of those big event weekends, which is new for us. So again, go forward. I welcome any direction from council on how you would like us to proceed. I feel personally, having kind of worked with Dr. Schneider on this process, we need a lot of time to understand the complexities and understand whose role is what. Again, in my information report, I noted we are a small municipal unit. There are very high expectations on what we are capable of achieving, both from resourcing and from a staffing perspective. I think it's also important that we allow our new contract with the RCMP some time to breathe, to let that develop, and to understand go forward how that relationship is going to work for the town. That's how all of this started as we started that exploration of the contract, potentially finding a different way to provide service or a different service provider. So I don't know if I've answered all of your questions, but otherwise, I encourage you to continue asking Dr. Schneider questions because it will help inform that solid piece of final deliverables.
Councilor Madeira Voss?
So I just want to be clear. The next step is to take this draft report back to our policing review committee. Is that correct?
Through Mayor Donovan to Councillor Madeira Voss, it will go to Acadia.
Right.
Dr. Schneider has met with the RCMP to go through it with them. I think we're waiting for a response from the Acadia Students Union. Once all of that is done, yes, we can certainly take it back to the Policing Services Review Committee.
Okay, so for now, our council doesn't need to move anything. We're just going to allow that process to continue and things will come back at a certain point. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Schneider. That moves us into public input. And do we have anybody in the audience? Yes, sir. If you would come up to the table and staff can probably help you to get that mic on and lift the table probably. And you have, try and keep to 3 minutes, but we'll give you 4 if you would like. If you would say your name and your address, please.
Kuwait Mayor and Council. I am a son, a brother, grandfather, and an uncle. And I've learned that life flows from the grandmothers to the granddaughter. I'm the only can at Baxter's Harbor Co-op. Chris Can. Thank you. First, I'd like to honor, and again, I think institution is the right word here, the grassroots Athenian practice of municipal democracy, which has people like me called to speak before you meet. Thank you. And I think because this is being recorded and anybody who's interested, I think this is a key in many of the things that I hear you're undertaking. I think I'll just start with a story. I made a phone call to, I think it's Argyle, District of Argyle, to the planning office, and I asked the question, do you have third-party liability for surety or surety bonding for third-party liability for your wind field, which has now reached its 25-year, it's finished. It expires after 25 years being the life cycle. Having had a lot to do with the introduction of industrial scale wind turbines on the North Mountain, the answer was, yeah, well, we were just talking about that. So the purpose of my coming here today is to point out that there's a certain kind of reckless endangerment with all the proliferation of energy projects that are going on currently, particularly with industrial scale wind turbines. Surety bonding for third-party liability occurred in Kings County within days of the announcement of the project Destin 25 for the North Mountain. And essentially after we were done, after about 2 years, council was able to recognize that had they not dealt with certain very specific things in their initial development agreements, or in this case, it was in Kings County, was simply developers working directly with council, that their citizens would realize around about 25 years that the responsibility for the decommissioning of the turbines would probably come right back here. So this is basically a gift, I would say, after all our experience. I'm surprised that it's not better known. I looked at material from West Hants for their several wind fields that they're developing there, not necessarily slam dunks as far as I can tell from reality, but particularly focused with First Nations who've been brought in, chiefs and council being brought in as partners, without, I believe, that being diffused and informed, particularly from Kings County, that if you do not undertake third-party surety bonding for third-party liability, simply put, Lori Layton with the Enviro Center at the Lookoff was the first to bring this up. And if you're going to open an Enviro Center, and you got to think it's big, it's really cool actually, but it's so full of things, all the PCBs, all the things that we've been terrified of all these years, they're all sitting up there right now. So what you have to have, and he was the first property that was approached 8 years before we knew, for a lease to use his land to put up a turbine or more, one or more. And he went through the contract and looked for the surety bonding clause, and there was none. So he said, well, you know, when you guys are done here, after the lease, after I receive my income for the lease, I'm going to be responsible for the decommissioning of this, right? So that's my cost. In the case of South Pubnico at this point in time, I would say, and it would be worth following up, that what they face now at the end of the life cycle, so forget the mishaps like blades falling off, which apparently they are in Surrey or in PEI anyway, the liability for any of these developments falls to the other signatory in the development agreement or to the municipality ultimately. So breath was taken in when councillors realized that. There was silence. Thank you very much.
Could you, excuse me, sir? It might be my hearing. I didn't get your name and I just want to make.
Chris Can.
Chris
Can.
Pan?
Can.
Pan.
The only can in Canning. I'm in the book. I'm the only one.
Thank you. I wasn't, I didn't get it. My hearing must be bad this morning. Thank you. Laura, do we have anybody online? No. And nobody else in the audience? All right, that brings us to, there are no internal committee reports. And that brings us to the CAO's report. Terms, interim, acting, CAO, are you interim or acting?
I've been called many things, Your Worship. To describe it, thank you, Your Worship, and members of council, and you have tabled before you the CAO's report, and certainly am available, our staff's available to speak to any of the highlighted areas, and certainly once again, you can see as evidenced in the report that your staff's been extremely busy, and whether you're looking at, as we're advancing the new Welcome Center or the work on the University Avenue Transmission Main project is back on track, and work on Fairfield as well is resumed. Certainly, the folks in our IT division have been extremely vigilant working with Grant Thornton on relative to cybersecurity. And there's just a real wealth of information in the report, Your Worship and Council, relative to the work in our parks and recreation efforts, and Director Lake's area relative to economic development and planning. And just as our last speaker, I know that during my time in Colchester County, we spent a lot of time addressing decommissioning of wind turbines and that. And so I have no doubt that as those considerations move forward, that your staff will be looking at that. And I know that Colchester certainly did a very thorough analysis relative to decommissioning provisions. And certainly as council is mindful of in terms of the Housing Accelerator Program is moving forward and certainly helping to support the housing needs in our community. And as we just heard from Barb relative to the work on community safety and compliance and the work and the analysis that went into preparing for St. Patrick's Day Cheaton Cup, but more importantly, it's that cohesive undertaking, the deliberate planning that was undertaken, and looking at the data from previous years to help to inform that operational plan. And again, of course, and then again, in terms of finance and corporate services, in terms of, our staff's been working to get the water and sewer bills out and so forth. So again, there's a variety of key information in the report, and staff's available to answer anything in particular should council like to do a deep dive on that.
Councillor McKay?
Thank you. Question on, so Willow Park is under construction and we're going to move potentially the VIC or some version of it in a tent to the waterfront park. So the hammocks are going in, Devour is going to be under full construction, and there'll be a deck on that backside. I'm curious how that is going to play out, because it's going to be a busy corner. With a bus, a big bus.
Through Mayor Donovan to Councillor McKay. We are rich in construction.
Yes, no question.
Which is really a blessing after so many years of facing so many delays. So we are going to continue to smile through what we anticipate to be a very busy tourism season. The Visitor Information Center, we are looking at, hopefully we'll have some photos for you soon, some design work, but it looks like our VIC staff will be moving to Waterfront Park into almost a little hut where there will be a window where we can support people, again, close to the washrooms at Railtown. The hammocks, I just got an update from Kelly at the WBDC. We anticipate that construction to begin on Thursday. That will provide for 4 hammocks, or 3, because I will always be in the 4th with my laptop. And as Devour gets underway, we are confident that where we're kind of locating the temporary visitor information center with a little bit of a shade sail, which is where the wine bus folks will be kind of getting on and off their tour bus. We're going to keep that all closer to the parking lot. So it will be set back from any work that's going on at Devour. Obviously, with all of our staff being on site in Waterfront Park on a regular basis, if that needs to change, the benefit to us is that that little temporary VIC that we're putting in will be movable. So if we have made an incorrect assumption, which sometimes we do, then we will be able to respond to that. And we'll be taking feedback. Basically, we're going into the summer season trying to be as flexible as we can, ensuring that all of our partners are well looked after.
We also had some discussions about, I know you mentioned the signage for safety and all that about the wolf sign, and there was discussions when it went in to fill it with I'll call it pressure dust, it's probably not what it is, but fill in some of the holes around it and things like that. So if someone stepped on it, it wouldn't be as, there was no place for your foot to fall in. That's the way it was, I'm envisioning in my head. So I'm just wondering when that work will be done. We were told it was gonna wait until spring, is what Aaron had told me back in whenever that was. January? He was working.
Yeah, I have instructed our parks and public works staff to prepare a work plan for that. So, we've been waiting for nicer weather. The nicer weather is here, so I will follow up and try and get an answer for you on that.
Great, thank you. One last one.
Sure.
Dog bites. Curious about that, what those situations were and if they're all at Reservoir, because we've had discussions over the years. Certainly I had voice because I have friends who don't go there because of the off-leash dogs. I'm not saying it shouldn't be an off-leash dog park, so no one get mad at me for that. Before I say it out loud. But we've talked about it on various situations because the bikes come in and go to the biking section. Sometimes dogs get not happy with that. And we said we might make it off leash when you get inside, allow dogs in one of the water parks, one of the ponds, not the others, things like that over time to try and mitigate some of these things. So I'm curious, I know Caden's not here, but what staff are looking at in that terms of that. Okay, thank you.
Through Mayor Donovan to Councillor McKay, we are also being careful about kind of talking about potential changes that might happen. So absolutely, we did have a concern raised by a physician without releasing a lot of personal identifying information. We were very happy to receive that notification. Staff on a regular basis do hear complaints about negative interactions in Reservoir Park between off-leash dogs and not off-leash dogs, be it people or bicycles or children. So we've had some conversation at the management level about how to kind of proceed with this. We have awareness now that there is an ongoing issue. We've also heard that people avoid Reservoir because of the concern about dogs. So again, going into the good weather, we're confident that the dog bylaw is effective, that we don't feel that really needs to change. So at this time, all of Reservoir Park is considered an off-leash dog area. We are going to start working on a public education campaign and changing our signage because we don't feel that we're clear enough in that kind of welcoming messaging as people are entering in the park to let folks know not only the risk, but also the expectation. And the expectation is clear. If your dog is off leash, it needs to be under voice control at all times. That's a stretch for a lot of folks. I have 4 dogs. None of them would qualify. So we're watching this very closely. Again, that's why when notification was received, staff reached out to council to let you know, also to see if council had been hearing these concerns as well. If council wished to take that into discussion and give more direction, you're welcome to do so. We just thought we would start with this awareness campaign. It's an amazing resource. We hope that everybody will continue to use that ability to have your dogs off leash respectfully and in accordance with that bylaw, which is clear under voice control.
Councillor Ingham?
Thank you. Had some of the same questions, but just to a follow-up, I have one question after this, but to a follow-up with all the construction we're doing coming in to town, as I'm mindful walking through town, and when are some of the crosswalks going to be painted better? Like there's one on the corner of Highland right now that there is no crosswalk at all. And then sort of before, I don't even know what the line's called, but there's something that you paint right before the crosswalk, because that corner in front of Tan is the most dangerous thing right now. People are parking on the sidewalk. I literally came over here to find Caden and an RCMP officer to give this person a ticket. I was just irate because I've almost been knocked over there. But when I'm walking around, I'm noticing that we need to do a better job on painting the sidewalks if we're going to be having this influx of construction going on, so we can provide, more safety. That's my first question. It's bad.
Line painting in general.
Yeah, line painting in general.
On our agenda for our operations meeting this week, we're talking about the springtime schedule for pavement marking. We have, every year, we have a contractor who comes in and does the line painting on the roads. And historically, the contractor has done all line painting, including the crosswalks, the stop bars. Last year, we had them do just the center line painting on the roads. And we had our crews do the crosswalks and stop bars in-house. This year, we're going back to the old model. We're gonna have the contractor come in and do the first application of pavement marking on everything, and then we'll maintain throughout the year as needed. The problem with the traffic paints that we're using now is they don't last very long. I mean, 6 months, you're lucky to get 6 months out of that paint. Unfortunately, it's a more environmentally friendly paint than the oil-based paints of the past, which we're no longer able to use. So we do have to stay on top of it. And I'll get a date this week on when we can have our pavement marking done for the springtime this year.
That would be good. And the other question is, I can't pull up the report. Rob, can you elaborate a little bit more on the land swap scenarios for dike lands? There's something on there, if my memory serves me correct. And I wasn't able to pull it up to jog my memory, so that's something.
What is the question?
Well, there was something in your report that sort of said working on land swaps on the dike. Am I correct or no?
Yeah, these are just very high level discussions that we're starting with Acadia about revising some of the property boundaries north of our town owned parcels on the dike lands, including our public works. There's an old rail spur that goes out towards the dikes. We're working on a vision for rearranging some of those parcels to benefit all parties.
So land swap's not really the right word. When I heard land swap, I thought we were getting more land. I don't know. But so.
We wouldn't be getting more or less land. It would literally be a land swap. We trade the same number of acreage with Acadia and some other landowners. We wouldn't be disposing of or getting any more land, no. It's just
Swapping land.
very,
No, I see
very,
that you're swapping land. I guess I was just really confused to when you say you're working on it, what.
we're not doing anything
You're not
yet.
doing anything.
No, we're starting a discussion, and any land swaps, any potential land swaps would be brought to council for consideration. We're just exploring options right now to see what Acadia and some of the other landowners might be okay with.
It's totally in the infancy stage is what you're saying then. All right.
I just could highlight a couple of issues because this is, in my time here for 10 years, this has been something different people have worked on, including driving around the fields with farmers. So we own a piece of agricultural land that's north of Home Hardware, which is substantial, and at one point was farmed, and at this point it's not being farmed. And Acadia owns to the west of that significant holdings. I think it's 45 acres or more. And that borders on the north property line of our public works facility. And some of you would have been part of Home Hardware acquiring a small piece of property behind them. And they're always challenged for space. This is an ongoing discussion with Brian over the years. And then the other issue that some folks would have experienced in the past is there is a rail spur, which comes from the back of our Railtown parking lot on a fairly awkward angle, to be honest, up to the side of the dike. And this type of title search takes some time because it hasn't been migrated and the ownership is unclear. So we're just resolving that now. That's taken Marcia and I months to work on. And so some of this, just because this was in the report, I want make sure people have the same level of understanding. The first step is engaging with the farmers out there. I think we need to pull them back in. We did in 2016, 17, as part of the plan review, have a number of discussions with them. But we need to do that again because we are, even our own yard, that we have issues with, should we expand it? Should we move somewhere else? Home Hardware, Acadia has aspirations for different things on their lands, on the Dykelands. So we're just trying to pull some of this together. And as Alex said, these are very preliminary conversations, but those are kind of the nubs of the issues that are in the conversation, I should say. So. Yeah.
Councillor Palmer?
Sure, just to maybe clarify what Devin said, the real spur, there is no real spur. There was just a definition of where it may have been, right? There was never real there.
Yeah, no, and some of this has been interesting to look into the history of, where I don't think there was.
Yeah, I don't think.
But it was a surveyed piece of land that would be known as a rail spur going out to a potential point to load a ship is what it looks like the intent of it was on the east of the harbor. So, but no, it's just, it is a surveyed piece of land that seems odd in the middle of the field.
It is, yeah, it is. The question I'd have for the CAO, and it's, I think Caden sent an email to the landlords about the garbage pickup. Are we gonna address that, or are we just gonna let it run? Because I know we're gonna have a headache with this coming up because of the date, and we talked about this last fall. I know Aaron was trying to get the date changed, and then it didn't get changed. So, I mean, we all know the students move out the end of the month, and it's gonna be a mess out there, I'll promise you.
It certainly, again, is a topic for this week to be brought up at management meeting to, again, to try to unpack that and to try to, because you're absolutely correct, Councillor, in terms of the rigidity of the scheduling in the past has caused issues in that, and there's an interconnectedness there, relative to the scheduling, but it's going to be discussed again in that.
Deputy Mayor Elliott?
Thank you. I just have had a couple of people ask intensely about the compost futures in Wolfville. And I'm wondering if other people and staff are getting a lot of questions about how to cope without a compost site. No,
Just one letter. Same people.
more gardeners in my neighborhood.
We've had one phone call in Public Works that I'm aware of.
Great, good to know.
No other questions? I have a question. Thank you for the update on the parks and open space planning process. I believe we had, when we approved that, we talked about having regular updates with council, and I'm wondering if maybe for the May committee of the whole meeting, we could have an actual, rather than part of the CAO's report, an actual update from Director Lake on where that is. I know from the audit information, it may not be as because of the small amount that has been billed or was at the end of January. It may not have moved ahead too far, but my request is just, could we at Committee of the Whole in May have a more fulsome discussion with Director Lake? Just putting that request in.
I can say it for the record, but yes, absolutely, we can, yeah.
Okay, thank you, thank you. That gives you a few weeks. Any other questions of the CAO? Thank you very much, Rob. All right, that moves us to accessibility report card. And is that you, Barb? I mean, you are probably the next three.
Thank you.
Good morning
Good.
again. I'm always so thankful for Laura's assistance when I get up here. Let me just slide this out of the way. Perfect. So through our accessibility plan and through being prescribed as a public sector body under the accessibility legislation, we are in a position to update council every year by the end of April. So we are a little bit early this year. So I'm going to give you an update today on where we are with our accessibility report card to basically yesterday. It gets more exciting if if I can get it to advance. There we go. There we go. So I was just before you a number of months ago. So some of this is going to seem very familiar. Not a bad opportunity though to have these discussions about accessibility as much as possible. So we were the second prescribed public sector body, or the first prescribed public sector body in the province to do a second plan, because Wolfville was the pilot location for accessibility plans. So we had our new plan for 2022 to 2025. And the photo that you see on the screen is Councillor Ingham, who is our chair of the Accessibility Advisory Committee, and one of our members, Alex, and a couple of his kids and his support dog, Chance. And so that was a photo from Accessibility Week a year ago. And we used that week as an opportunity to launch our redone, fully published on the appropriate glossy paper as per our committee members, and also a nicely plain language edited report. So we are currently working on that report, kind of going through, and that report, that plan gives us kind of our commitment to the community. It also helps to guide us. It becomes very much a strategic plan for us go forward. So today, again, as I said, this is going to let you know where we were at the end of March. So we've made some progress. Again, I was just speaking to you about this a number of months ago, but we do have funding that was secured for automatic doors at the Recreation Center. We are still waiting for installation of that. And one of the notes that I put here was for long strips. And this is one of the benefits of working with folks on our committee that have lived experience. Often when we are out and about in the community, we see those accessible door entry buttons that are the round ones. And what we heard from our committee members is that you need actually quite a bit of force to be able to hit that button. And it's quite small, all things considered. So if you've got some mobility limitations, it might be hard to hit that in the right spot with the right force. So again, keeping in mind that we want all of our buildings to be as accessible as possible and really remove those barriers. The long strip installations were really recommended by our committee members. So that's what will be going in at the Recreation Center. So you can actually kind of tap that with a mobility device, and it doesn't require as much force, and you have way more kind of surface area to tap to get that to work. We also secured funding for paved pathways at Clock Park, and we are waiting for good weather for that to happen. And as we are now aware, looking outside, good weather might be here.
Snow tomorrow.
You know what? I don't always believe Dan Stovall.
He can hear you say that.
And I know he's listening and he's probably going to run over from the fire department right now. That's fine. I welcome that. I welcome debate. We also have an ongoing commitment to build in some accessible features, and council has been very involved in talking about the Visitor Information Center, which is being rebuilt right now. And again, we did meet with Rob from Fathom, the consultant leading the Parks and Open Spaces master planning process. And I look forward to him reporting back what he heard from working with our Accessibility Advisory Committee. So the committee did provide feedback through the province. We have now kind of draft proposed built environment accessibility standards. So those standards came out. I know that our staff took a look at them, our committee took a look at them, and we did provide feedback to the province through our committee and individually as well. So we're still waiting for those to be finalized. Once those are finalized, we'll have really good guidelines go forward of exactly what we require as we build anything new. And that will impact things like sidewalk cafes, how we do crosswalks, how we build physical buildings, accessible washrooms. All of those pieces will be clearly mapped out. Communications is an area that we are really working well in. So again, through our website, through our reports, through anything we're doing, we are really trying to use plain language. I commend our IT director, David, who during a tech presentation last week kept asking the consultants to stop using acronyms. And I just said IT, I should have said information technology. So it's a work. Thank you, David. So we are really trying to work on that. And I think even since I've been here, we're trying to communicate in a way that is more welcoming, brings people in, it's more inclusive, and we will all get there more slowly, but we will all get there. We're trying very hard to increase our lead time for background agendas. And we're also promoting their availability a lot more than we used to. When we promote our meetings, we let people specifically know that the background agenda is available for review, and people are reviewing them. We do provide captioning. We provide access to our meetings through digital formats. Wolfville Blooms continues to be an accessibility tool because it works well with a screen reader, but also it allows us to use plain language and to unpack complex projects in a way that's more engaging and more accessible to all members of our community. We are doing more community engagement. We also have a list of ASL providers, so American Sign Language. And Nick and I met last week talking about some of our upcoming events, as well as our community grant programs. And we've identified a few areas where we would like to go forward, provide ASL interpreters to be present. Again, it's one more step that we can take to normalizing that level of access with everything that we do. I'm really excited that I finally ordered accessible business cards. So we found a local provider, and it is only $75 more to add Braille to our business cards. So when the one that I had done for myself as the accessibility coordinator, when that arrives, I look forward to showing that off. And as we update business cards for folks, I know that we've got better at adding pronouns, thanks to Councillor Butler who flagged that for us. So we're adding pronouns if people want that. And now we'll be able to add Braille as well. So that's one more step we're taking moving forward. And that was a deliverable in our accessibility report. So some additional progress. I completed the Train the Trainer programming through the Accessibility Directorate. I look forward to rolling that out for council, likely after we get through budget and people can breathe and have a little bit more time. That's a wonderful program, and it was really worth taking that on. Our clerk and members of council and our CAO have been working through lots of policy review. And part of that review is understanding how we would use a lens of accessibility and really thinking about equity, diversity, and inclusion go forward. We are doing our inclusion work. I'm going to be back this afternoon with Aditi Sharma to present to you a little bit of a proposal around a new program we're thinking about launching. And again, it goes along with all of the communications pieces that we've been working on. We're just trying to understand through every single thing we do, how do we ensure that we are acknowledging diversity? How are we trying to make things more equitable? And how do we ensure that everybody feels included? We did our accessibility event last week. We are in the works of planning a new one for, we thought it was going to be June 1st, but I believe that is competing with Apple Blossom. So we might be looking at a different event for that. The other piece is we are still waiting to be prescribed under the Dismantling Racism and Hate Act. There is an update happening on that from the province at the Association of Municipal Administrators Nova Scotia Spring Conference that I look forward to hearing. And kind of the lack of clarity right now, we have really strong legislation from the province, but we are not sure how we will be asked to manage that as a prescribed public sector body. And the big piece that is unknown right now is, will we be looking at separate plans for accessibility and equity, diversity, and inclusion, or will we combine those two? And that will have requirements for committees, that will have requirements for deliverables. So we don't yet know those details. So right now we are going forward with plans for doing another round of our accessibility plan. We have been working with the business community as well. Funding has been opening for business owners to do accessible upgrades to their physical spaces. When those grants have become available, we get the notification from the Accessibility Directorate, and we have shared that out through our partners at the WBDC. We were given notification of a community-based ramp project to create small ramps to help folks with mobility devices get into local businesses. Those details have not moved forward, so I'm looking forward to hearing what comes back from that. And of course, we have our ongoing information and enforcement for sandwich boards, and that falls into the scope of what Caden and Marin are working on. We have a couple of barriers still to complete the report card. So one of the pieces is called CART, or Communication Access Real-Time Interpreters. That is like a live captioning person who will kind of log into a meeting and provide captioning on the fly for you. We haven't secured a provider. We also haven't had a request for that yet. So that's kind of one piece. We'll still pull together some resources so we know what it costs and how to reach out if that is required. And then Councillor Ingham just updated me. She might want to add some points here about some advocacy that is going to be done through the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities. And then the other piece was, we were tasked in the current accessibility plan to develop a public awareness campaign to help the community understand barriers to accessibility. So this is kind of what we are developing into our Accessibility Week open house / event that I look forward to bringing back details on next month to council. And it's really going to be an open house type event where people will learn a bit about potential barriers and understand what can be done about that. We're going to use it as a feedback starting point and a start to engagement with the community as well. And then from that feedback, we'll have a really long list, I suspect, of pieces from the community to come back to our committee. And that's what the committee will start working with as we start mapping what are the things that we want to achieve in our next round of our accessibility plan. And again, the whole purpose of working within the space of accessibility, what we do with our advisory committee and what members of council are tasked to do is for us to recognize, remove, and prevent barriers. So I don't know if council has ideas already as we start to think about what's going to be in our next plan. You could certainly provide some feedback now, or if not, maybe Councillor Ingham would like to provide a little bit of an update. And I think you might have a question for me about image descriptions as well.
I think we talked about this last week, and I think you did say it's been about a year that you started doing the image description, or I was just calling captioning at the bottom. And some people have asked, why is that on there and how does that benefit other people?
Yeah, so on our social media posts, one of the things that you will start to see is, I should have an example pulled up, but I don't. But we have our, if you think about a Facebook or an Instagram post, you usually have your graphic or your photo. And then you have your little text, which is whatever it is that you're saying outbound to the community. And then you will notice that we are starting to use an image description. So you'll see in all caps, it says image, and then it will be a description of what is actually contained in that image. So some of the training I did last year included accessible social media, and that was a program that was offered by the Accessibility Directorate. It was new learning for me, and it was a game changer. So for folks who are low-sighted or without sight, who are using a screen reader, if they're using social media, screen readers do a really good job at reading. So if it was one of our posts, it would say Town of Wolfville, and then it will actually say whatever it is that we've typed in to say. So, you know, council committee of the whole is meeting on Tuesday morning, blah, blah, blah. But the images that are there are not well navigated by screen readers. So when we take the time to add that little simple image description, it invites more members of our community in to have that experience. That is a piece of equity that we can offer, and it just allows more people that understanding of what it is that's there. Now, we've had a lot of comments about it, some not positive. One of them was at our funding announcement that we did, because I was describing who was standing there and that people were bundled up, and some people weren't aware of what that image description was for. But it's a really small step that we can take to just ensure more people have more access to what it is that we're trying to communicate. We do that for links as well. I've been working with staff, so when we share a link, we have a little description of this is what it's about. Click the link for more details, because on social media, we often see the link with a little bit of a description that's not always picked up by a screen reader.
Councillor Ingham?
Thank you so much, Barb. This was probably the first time, I think it was early, the presentation. So I do really appreciate that, because I think with COVID, the first plan and the second plan kind of get melded together, and we weren't meeting as often. I just want to throw it there to the rest of council. When we do go back after Barb has done this presentation, I do get questions from the committee saying, what was council's feedback? What did they think of what we were doing? Because we don't, you know, it only comes once a year, and then it comes when the new plan comes out. So if you have any feedback, we are moving into, this plan right now is 2022 to 2025. So the committee is going to be looking at the new plan 2025 to 2028. It's 3 years. And so we're moving into that. So I would appreciate any feedback that you think we have. There is a hard copy that is here, and it's also on the website. Yeah, so any feedback that you may have. I do want to send a little bit of more notice out to the Accessibility Week. That's the end of May into June. We haven't picked the date. That is going to our committee on Monday. I would really appreciate council's input on that. And once we have the date all set up, it's a lot of work, right, for us to be putting into it. I know it's a lot of work for Barb. So I'm going to be sending out an email to see how you guys can support this with us, as you know, we're trying to make Wolfville more barrier free. So it's a really good opportunity to meet people, and provide feedback. So once we get a little bit more details, I will share that with council, because it is really important to have your input. So that's it. Any questions?
Other questions? Councillor Palmer?
Thanks, Barb. That's pretty interesting, actually. The question I have, it might be more for Alex than for Barb, but if I open a new business in the town of Wolfville, would it have to be accessible?
That's
Or
a
maybe it's for
Devin
Devin. I
question,
don't
yeah.
know who it's for.
When someone's renovating a space,
Okay.
absolutely. What we've seen, well, over my time here, some people come into a space and they really don't change anything, and some of our older spaces certainly don't meet current requirements.
But if I renovated it, I would have to make it.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Other questions or comments? Thank you, Barb. We are almost 2 hours and I suspect the next one might have a longer discussion. I'm just surveying council to see if you want a 10-minute break or not, just checking in. Why don't we, and can I ask, I heard you, Barb, say this afternoon, so we are going into the afternoon, is that the plan?
Yeah, this is an OB one.
Yes, I knew that, but it didn't seem like that long an agenda, so I wasn't sure what the plans were. Pardon?
We'll space out our works to make it.
Okay, all right, I just checking. Let's, or we could keep pushing right through. We'll take a 10-minute break. It's, so if we come back at 11 o'clock. Welcome back, council and members who are watching us online and staff and Barb. We have Wolfville Community Safety and Wellness Model Draft Study and Planning Document.
Through Mayor Donovan to council, most of what I was going to cover was covered earlier when Dr. Schneider was here. But I am happy to answer any additional questions or facilitate more conversation. I know it was a lot to receive and a lighter presentation than I had anticipated, but definitely still there's a lot of unknowns. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to help with that.
All right, I will open it up to questions of council. No, Councillor McKay.
Thank you. So I'm just curious then, are we going to wait for all of the feedback, as Councilor Madeira Voss said, or like it's going to go to Acadia, ASU, Police Review Committee, various stakeholders, RCMP, I think that you said. So are we going to gather that feedback, and is that coming through your office? And then, because I think the reason we wanted it at least in draft right now was to say, do we need more resources in the budget to accommodate this? What clearly we're not going to put together a not-for-profit and have everything done by June or even probably next year. But do we even need, is it out of your office, and is there enough time and space to work through all of that now? Did that make sense?
Did.
Okay. Through Mayor Donovan to Councillor McKay, I appreciate that question. And it was the whole intent of this piece of work was to land it kind of in February, so we would have that opportunity to get a sense of what might be required. The big bump along that trajectory, which we had not really anticipated, was right around the time we contracted Dr. Schneider to do this work, we found out that our police contract had to change. That was the unanticipated piece, and we are in, as of yesterday, we are in our new RCMP contract, moving to a Municipal Policing Services Agreement, an MPSA, from the PPSA, the Provincial Policing Services.
MPSA.
That's it, yes. So we moved from P to an M. And we have that, for 1 year, I believe, as a minimum to kind of really get a sense of how that is working. I think there are a lot of conversations that have to happen with Acadia. From the report, even in its draft version, the expectations from Acadia are very, very high. And I'm not always sure that they have the resources that maybe we assume that they have available. So that needs a lot more conversation and a lot more dialogue before we can even determine if we are going to move forward based on that actual model that was presented. We know from all community safety office models that it's about collaboration, it's about building relationships, it's about communication, which again, every member of our staff team and all of our partners are committed to moving forward with. But at this time, there is no ask for budget because there's nothing to resource. If we got the final report back and felt that there was something that really was ready to be actioned, we would still be months out. So, and that's likely something for a new council to determine. The other thing too is I'm not sure if it makes sense to plan on resourcing this very new piece of work before we actually get a better sense of not only what's happening with our new RCMP contract, but also what's happening with the province, looking at how they are going to be delivering policing.
I follow. So that sounds to me then that either one, you are going to collect all of the information over the next year, or two, it's going to sit there until everyone else deals with it and it'll come back later.
It's likely me continuing to stick handle this. And primarily because I'm already doing a lot of the community harmony work, which is really where it fits.
I was just trying to get a sense of because typical, I think we said last year, having that operations plan now is also really helpful because we make decisions based on resourcing and that operations plan, which we still don't have. So it's, I just want to make sure that you're good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Madeira Voss?
Thank you, Mayor Donovan. So Barb, if you're going to continue feeding, because there were component of the report that included activities that are already going on. I mean, Acadia has taken some steps towards, violence against their female students. There are pieces that exist already. So will we be getting sort of information on how some of those pieces are working? Like because I was curious about how effective those things are, even though, it's not necessarily under the new structure that's being proposed, but it does address some of those priorities. And just to kind of keep an eye on how those things are going. Would that be part of what you're looking at doing? I'm not sure how you're staying connected, I guess.
Thank you for that question. Through Mayor Donovan to Councillor Madeira Voss, there are a lot of unknowns that Stephen pulled out through his work. So the level of violence against women and the level of assault and things that he indicated were happening in the community, those are not well understood by our compliance team, by staff, by members of council. I'm sure we understand that those risks exist, but the level to which it was reported in that body of work certainly raises concerns. That is an area where we need more information from our partners at Acadia to ensure that that everybody's aware of this and we can immediately start acknowledging that and trying to be proactive. And again, work that we will do currently with the RCMP to raise that awareness. That said, it's going to be a long, slow process of pulling pieces back, and how that comes to council might be through the CAO report. It might be through individual specialized reports. Again, the next kind of benchmark piece that council will receive will be that final report, which should kind of answer a lot of these questions. But yeah, still a lot more work to be done. I thought it was going to be a hard stop end of February. I think that we're going to have probably another year of pulling information together and really getting this to a point at which we might be able to make some hard decisions and really look at the feasibility of resourcing this.
Right. Okay. But I have a question. Looking at the first paragraph of the report, it states, as I understood the direction, that our concerns were on small crime and property damage. And this report has morphed into something, those of us who sit on RCMP and look at their quarterly crime stats, some of the things in his report have not jumped out at us at the crime stats. And I can't speak for Acadia, but one would think if those were so overwhelming in our community, they would show up in the RCMP's crime stats. So my question, Barb and I already talked this morning, how did these marching orders or this RFP become what we received? And I appreciate that it was not because of anything staff didn't do, it just happened. But how can we manage it so that, we are a small community of 5,000 people plus 4,000 students at Acadia. We are not Vancouver. We don't fall in the same kind of legislation that even Halifax, who has much more authority over some of these things than we do. Is there something that council can do to support staff so that you have, I don't know, better foundation for controlling this study that seems to have, I don't know how it went from what the direction was to what it became, but so that's my question. Is there anything we can do, or how can we collectively manage this? Because it's, I think it's out of control.
I'm taking a moment to think about my response. The body of work that we received back was far more complex than I had anticipated. Certainly that feedback was given through every step of the project. When I first started working with Dr. Schneider, you know, we were focused in on this is a feasibility piece of work. So determining if this is something that would benefit the community. And going back to the start of this journey, it was because during our policing services review engagement cycle, we determined that there were definitely gaps in service. We also, thanks to some really good conversations with the RCMP and with Justice, we were very aware of the fact that some of those gaps of service were not because the RCMP were not doing their job. It was just that that was not their job to do. So we identified these gaps. And so when we brought Stephen in to do this piece of work, it was really to look at when we have these gaps that exist in our community, and we have police who do police work, for lack of a better description, and we have the university, and we have the town, and we have the business community, and we have residents, and everybody has their roles. But how do we cover off that gap that exists? And that's really often what community safety offices do. So starting into this journey, it was really about how do we come up with a plan to resource and manage whatever is necessary to cover off that gap. And that gap was nuisance issues, it was property damage, vandalism, those very small pieces. Again, from our community engagement cycle, resoundingly, the community members who responded, we had like 750 really great responses, great narrative responses. People said they felt safe in Wolfville. So safety is not an issue. The issue was that gap in service, and how do we deal with that? So over the past year, being very aware of what those gaps were, as partners through the RCMP and Acadia and the town and WBDC, we've really tried to do as much of that proactively. Once we understand there's a problem, we can start to address it. So we're getting better at that. How we got to this really heavy piece of academic work that is before us now, that's really a great example of something that might be easier resourced if it was coming from the province down, going back to the deputy mayor's comment about just kind of that whole structure of, bureaucracy and being very different than a grassroots effort. So what council can do to help move this forward in a way that's going to be a little bit more effective, I would really encourage council to spend the time and go back and identify what are your questions and come up with those clear questions, and then we can flow that back through Dr. Schneider. I certainly did that after reviewing the report. I had some very key questions that I wanted him to answer. I expect that that will be answered in that final report to come back. So whatever these pieces are, really drill down, and that would be the best way to kind of get something a little bit more manageable, likely, during the next round.
Councillor McKay?
Thanks. Yeah, just following up on Meredith, because I believe it is his passion in life that this is his thing. So I get that that's why we got, well, I think that's why we got what we got, which is obviously a huge body of work. And the questions that we have back will be one thing, but we have now put out into the world that we have a sexual assault problem in our town. Like we've just sort of said things that, we don't have stats for, so we don't have the true information on. So if someone reads that, really a great piece of work, no question. But if someone reads that, what is their perception of this town, and what is their expectation of us to solve that problem? And I don't know what that is.
That's a good point, because it's a problem that we can't even verify that it exists. It does concern me. I hadn't thought about that, Councillor McKay, but that's a good point. I thought the first group, the Community Health Board and some of the people that the Wednesday night group has talked to the portal, and we know that there's a need in the town. All the services are in Kentville. It's very hard for a youth who is struggling or an adult who is struggling and they're in Wolfville. So having some services in Wolfville is good. It strikes me that there are a number of groups in town who are addressing that the first speakers, the people that are trying to put something in the Baptist church to bring people from the portal 1 day a week and so on, which are much more manageable at a community level than creating a society. So how do we share that information with you or with him? Just write it down and send it to you.
Yeah, thank you,
Okay.
Donovan.
So
Yeah,
easy.
I sent her my notes already.
yeah, and many of you already do that, and I do appreciate that. So yeah, as this information starts to come forward again through the process with Dr. Schneider, I was definitely saying, like, let's really look at what's happening within Wolfville. It's hard to not want to do this regional or provincial approach, but we need something that's workable for our small, unique community. And so any of that feedback that you can think of and you know, give yourselves a couple of weeks to put that in order, send that my way, and I will certainly flow that back to Dr. Schneider. How it gets incorporated into a final report is going to be up to Dr. Schneider, but if you're flowing that through, at least that helps me understand where you're at with some of the questions that you have or information resources. As I noted earlier, staff are really challenging themselves to act as navigators. So if somebody asks me a question and I can't provide that support, if I know that something exists, I can make that connection. So the more we communicate in that open, transparent manner, the more we will support our community.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Madeira Vaz?
Thank you, Mayor Donovan. So this report, which was part of our package, is available publicly, right? And I also shared Councillor McKay's concern when I read it, because a lot of the, some of these key points are also drawn from national studies that do not extract, from which they're difficult to extract Wolfville specific numbers. And so what we're putting out is truthful information on a national scale, but doesn't necessarily represent reality in our own community. I would like to have something attached to this that says, before anybody starts to read the report, that has that qualifier, because I think it needs to be put in a context so that somebody reading this, and that first item, when I read it, I thought, whoa, what am I missing? Because I don't, you know, so I do think that, you know, we set out to ask for a feasibility study that was very focused on certain things. You know, I don't want to be critical of what because it is a huge body of work, but it is a huge body of work within a much broader context. And it is not simply a feasibility study for what is feasible for us to manage, right? That is not what we received. And so that's the thing that concerns me, is somebody reading this and jumping to conclusions. And I suggest also that if this is going to be made public in any way, that we have right at the front information that clarifies what reports and how these are drawn and the limitations in terms of applying it to our community, but also maybe sharing some of this, alongside that, the RCMP stats, you know, because the report, I know that some of the report, I've been trying in my reports from the committee to include all those stats that say under various categories what our numbers are, because I find those very reassuring. When I read those, I do find them reassuring. And I think we need some kind of balance there that says, okay, this is all useful information. This is, from an RCMP perspective, the reality of the number of situations that we're facing, so that that information is out there as in a balanced way. I don't want us really to be putting out in this public forum something that just stresses one perspective. And that's what I fear we would do if this is out there in isolation. So that would be my suggestion to those two, that we have a context and then somehow include the stats that we do have that are specific to our community.
Councillor Ingham.
I mean, I think no doubt, sexualized violence, alcohol and drug use is pretty high in young adults necessary. So I don't think it's just specific to Wolfville. The report was really intense. There was one thing that I felt was missing, and that's why I asked him about the elderly population, because I feel like this got started as sort of more of a community safety officer position that sort of liaisons Wolfville with Acadia. And I mean, as a Good Neighbors group started, you heard many times that there were so many parties that people in these neighborhoods weren't sleeping. So they were having extreme mental stress. That wasn't mentioned. And so that's sort of, I feel like, how it got started to sort of, and so it got a little bit bigger. And in the end, in the 5-year, it's 5, employees. I don't think that was our intent on it. And I do appreciate all his work because it was very, very thorough. And I just feel like when I ask that question, what the people that are voting in this town, they're going to see this and they're going to go, what am I going to get out of, employing 5 people? That's just what I'm saying. And it's like, we didn't address the issues of the extreme partying in neighborhoods and how that affects people's mental health because they're not sleeping. We didn't, address some sort of scam. Like, we didn't address all of that, and elder abuse, all of that stuff, which is the more community. So that's my point on it. So.
Councillor McKay.
Yeah, I agree. I think somewhere in the middle of that report and the RCMP stats, because clearly not every sexual assault or every drug use gets reported to the RCMP. So there is a space in there that there's the RCMP stats plus, whatever it is, 10%, I don't know, but there's got to be something. But I think we need to contextualize what was actually presented to us and put it out there and say, what are the things we really wanted? Because when we came from that policing service, it was more about filling those gaps. Someone in the Corps maybe not having someone to call, not knowing that number to call, that one consistent person. Who was it? How do they find the help for this? Like, they were really much smaller than that came our way. So, and it came, and I think Mayor Donovan and I came back with social worker and policing that was at Town and Gown, and there was a liaison, but those were the things we were looking at. Certainly was not 5 people, a whole, a whole other department really of the town.
Well, it was a department that was in Vancouver or Victoria, wherever it was. Is it Vancouver? Victoria?
Vancouver.
Vancouver.
Yeah.
Yeah, so big. All right, does that help? Oh, sorry.
Well, not so much a question, but I wanted to express my agreement with what Councillor Madeira Voss said. I do dog therapy up at Acadia, and there are mental health issues amongst the students themselves. I heard from 2 recently who told me they did not go out for 3 days during homecoming because they were so scared. So there's very wide issues for sure. And yeah, I think we have to broaden the awareness.
Okay, thank you. I think you're still up for the International Support Program.
Hello. Thank you for joining me this morning. So with that presentation, the goal is to have the student who worked with me, Aditi Sharma, join me. So she's expected here at 1.
Okay.
So if it is the will of the mayor, I would like to ask for that to be bumped till that time. So after lunch, and then she can help present and answer some questions.
Absolutely. That's
Thank
fine,
you.
everybody. All right, so then we'll move back to their number of council policies. So public input policy amendments, and that would be you, Laura.
Drag it out to lunchtime.
Well, I don't know how Barb Shaw, so I'm not even going to try. I guess I don't need to share the screen. So the next three reports are policies that have been reviewed as part of the work plan of the Council Policy Review Task Force. I don't have any new information to add to the reports, but I can certainly give you a brief overview. The first one is a public input policy. So this was originally titled as the public participation policy. It was decided to change the title to make it more reflective of that segment of the agenda where public are invited to come and speak with council. The biggest change in the policy is the removal of the 30 minutes time limit on that segment and the increase of the length of time where someone can provide feedback. So it has gone from 3 minutes to 5 minutes. And again, that was to look at promoting, to follow up on some of the stuff, the work that Barb's talked about in accessibility, but we want to promote inclusivity and to invite people to come and speak with council. And we felt that where the restriction on the time limit, it may be detrimental. Some people may not want to come up and speak if they might have a fear of public speaking anyway. I can relate. So if they have that extra barrier on them, then that might be more restrictive. Trying to see what else. The only other change, I think, that policy was around, we added some clarification of accommodations that can be offered, such as virtual attendance or to speak with staff if there's anything else that we can do to make them feel more comfortable. So I think that was it. I don't know if the task force wants to add anything.
I have a bunch of questions.
Sure.
I guess of the task force. Oh, I'm sorry, Ian.
Oh, you go ahead.
Councillor Palmer. No, you go.
I've just got two comments, I guess there really are. If you don't limit the time, to a half an hour, I think it's half an hour now on the agenda.
Yeah.
Could we not just be inundated and be overtaken by people making comments and we would never have a meeting?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be a concern? If I'm the only one who could concern about that, I could just see a certain issue that happened maybe 5 years ago and how that would have gone if you had it in infinite length of time and we would have got nothing done.
So we did discuss that, and I believe just with the experience of the members of the task force that that's a very rare occasion. It's usually when something big happens
Yes.
that we have, and I know that the instance you're referring to, and we did have a packed room here, and everyone was given a chance to speak. And I think that's just it's part of, I guess, council as a role as well in the chair to manage that. It was felt if someone was speaking with the 5 minutes in mind, if they had more to add, then certainly we don't want to cut people off. They can, if it's adding to the conversation or to their input. But again, it would be with council's sort of discretion on a case by case basis at that point. But the fact that I think what you're saying is that there's a concern that it could basically overtake the whole meeting, and based on experience, it's been very rare when we've had. I mean, today we had one person. There's not often that it's many more than a handful of people wanting to speak.
But it would be the controversial ones that when we get everybody involved.
That's exactly right. And we tend to go over the time anyway when there's a packed room for people looking to speak.
And the other question I had, and then you talked about if somebody answers a question, who's going to respond? How is that gonna and I think now we don't do a very good job of responding. I know we try to, but we don't always.
Don't respond.
Well, but even if we're supposed to respond.
No, we're not
But if they ask a question of Director Lake, somebody should be responding.
We are not supposed to respond. We can't direct it to staff.
That's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I mean.
To come back, not on the spot, but.
Yeah, but even then, we're not necessarily doing that very, very well. So if the question gets asked, and I'll just make up an example, somebody asks Director Lake, or a question that would be for Director Lake, how is he going to respond to that? It's a very pointed question. I don't know what it is, but.
If someone in public input directly asked directly.
So there'd be,
or
it would
asked.
be through the CAO, but the question would be a director related question. How are we going to respond to that?
Well, that, in my opinion, would be the chair's response would be to say that that's not going to be answered now. I mean, I think if it can be, if it's a simple question, I think we had an incident before where someone asked something, I can't remember what it was now, maybe the task force remembers, but it was something that could easily have been answered with like 3 words or whatever.
I think we have done that. We've,
Yeah,
if it's
if
yes or no, like,
Yes.
are you meeting on the 16th? Yes. And we might say, we'll refer that to staff, and Devin would know we are referring it to him, but it's not meant to be question and
Yeah,
answer.
that's correct.
No,
Which
that's
is
right.
going to be
And-
one of my questions, but.
Well, that's kind of why we changed the title from participation to input, because it's not supposed to be a sort of conversation.
But my question is though, like if we get to the point that it's a question that Director Lake is going to answer, and it's going to be good, and the CAO is going to say, I'll refer it, or the mayor is going to refer it to the staff, how is staff going to get back to that person? Like, when does that happen?
We used to.
Yeah,
I can help you with that one,
Yeah,
because we
go.
used to do it, if I remember correctly, so I think we have to be careful what ones we answer and what ones we don't, because I think that.
I agree. I
something-
agree
so
100%.
I'd say we all, as a group, need to decide what that might be, but, correct me if I'm wrong, but Mayor, we would say if it was a question, for instance, on a planning one, we've had people come and ask fairly in-depth questions, and instead of answering on the spot, we had said they will be as part of the CAO report next month. And there were an email that went back to that individual. More than likely Aaron did that, but it was also an answer in the CAO report. So it was there for everyone else to see the answer to it. So I think we got away from that a little bit, but when there were specific questions asked, and I'm thinking of a couple that maybe Mr. Daniels asked at various points, they were really specific questions. So Aaron had sent the CAO had sent the answer back, but it was part of the CAO report at the end.
And
We used to-
sometimes the one a few weeks ago that was about
Water.
flooding the water, and just, I know that a discussion, but there was a follow-up discussion with that gentleman and Alex.
There was.
There was.
Okay, good.
So that's, but not, we wouldn't put staff on the spot to answer.
No,
But
not
we directed
expected.
it to the appropriate staff. Counselor McKay?
Yeah, so I think that we do need to answer what questions get answered and what ones don't. A simple yes, we'll meet next week is pretty simple, but some that are detailed probably should just be referred on. And I just reflect some of the discussion we had on the time limit, because I have had on more than one occasion, someone say to me, 30 minutes, you sit there until we're done talking. Your job is to listen, and the person's not wrong. So if there is an issue where people want to come and speak to us, I think we would have more of a issue saying your 30 minutes is up and the room is full, as opposed to staying and listening, because we'd probably be here a whole lot longer the next time, or maybe none of us will be here the next time. But I think it became a balance of, it's our job to listen. If everyone was done in 5 minutes and did their piece, it might take an hour and a half. And then it was, I think the discussion was more, the mayor and the CEO would say something to the effect of, if you have nothing new to add. So you could stop it's not just go up and repeat what everybody says, but if there's nothing new to add, then we can say, move on.
Yeah.
If I recall that correctly from the discussion.
Counselor Madeira Ross?
I think for me, the most important part of this change was the name change of calling it public input as opposed to public participation, because we wanted to really be very clear. This is not a time to come and engage directly with council and ask council questions. And it's the time to give input to help inform the decisions that council makes. That's the goal. And really the time change, I don't think that's so substantial in terms of how we operate, because I don't see it being a different, creating a different way of relating to people than we do right now. It's just that we're giving people, instead of 3 minutes, we're suggesting 5 minutes, knowing that for some people, public speaking is very difficult, and just trying to address that time limit so that, you know, from a, I don't know, just to increase the people's level of comfort in even starting to present. They may not need it, but I mean, they know that there's a time limit of 5 minutes. I understand that in the past, there was no time limit, and that created a lot of problem. That's when actually people, I think a couple of councils ago, there was no time limit, and people could come and speak for 10 minutes or whatever, and that was, so I think the time limit is important. All we're suggesting is allowing another 2 minutes, would may not make a big difference for our, I mean, we hardly ever have very many people, but it's just to make it easier for people who are hesitant to be able to maybe make it more comfortable. And the 30-minute, you know, I agree. I don't know what purpose that serves, because if it is a contentious topic, people are going to come regardless. And how do you cut? I mean, there are ways of managing that, as Councillor McKay said. If you know, if we see that people are just repeating and repeating, and we have had a meeting where within those 30 minutes, I think it was something to do with the development, a caveat. I can't remember what it was called, but we had about 15 people come and say exactly the same thing for 30 minutes. And we can't really stop that. But considering how many people speak during public input and how long, you know, it doesn't seem, this change, I don't think will make it unmanageable in my view.
Okay. I had some of those same concerns. I agree with the 5 minutes. It's hard sharing to cut people off. It feels uncomfortable. So happy about that. I'm unclear as to the reason we gave an extra minute was if it did not look like we were going to use up our 30 minutes. So my question to the committee, why wouldn't you just give people 10? If you're going to give them 10.
You mean 10 instead of 5?
Well, you've said you can have 5 and then you can have another 5, but when it.
That sort of leads into
that's-
sort of our presentation, you know, component when people want to come do a presentation. So 10 minutes, you could almost do a presentation in that. I
think this,
mean,
I can't find it, but I think it
If I
says.
may, it's for, so when at committee of the whole, where public input happens twice on
Yes,
that
yeah.
agenda. So, and I believe the extra time was so that if someone has a question regarding some of the reports that they're about to
Yes.
hear at the meeting, then it would give them time to
It
come back
says-
and.
Move it from 3 minutes to 5 minutes and from 1 minute return to 5 minutes. So,
Yeah.
well, that's not what we do now. Right now, we have 2. So you need to clarify that, because right now we have beginning and at the end. But at the beginning, if somebody is speaking for currently 3 minutes, then they can have another minute if, you know, if we weren't going to go to the full 30 minutes. So if you meant they can have another 5 minutes at the end, that's not clear here. It looks like, because if you're following what we do now, you can have 4 minutes at the beginning and 4 minutes at the end. So my question was, if we, and I've understood giving the extra time, if there wasn't a room full of people and we're not going to use up the 30 minutes, but since there is no more 30 minutes, and I have a comment about that, then if you're going to give them 10, why don't give them 10? That's a question. I am concerned, as was mentioned, it doesn't matter to me because I don't have another job generally to get to, but I am very sensitive that some people, if we have a committee meeting that is supposed to end at 12 and you have other things in your life, either this committee or a future one, I'm assuming those of you who might be in that situation considered that. It doesn't happen often that we go over, but it has happened. Certainly, I can think of if people had 10 minutes and, you know, there would have been 4 or 5 people from the Good Neighbors group, it certainly could have gone on into an hour. So my concerns are, if we get rid of, so are we giving people 10 minutes or are we giving them 5 at the beginning of cow and 5 at the end. I think that needs to be clarified because it's not what it says here. And if those of you who do have a tighter schedule than some of the rest of us don't mind that we could be going on for an hour, then that was just a concern. I would, something that I have wanted to see, and it didn't really happen in this term of council because of COVID, but I'm a big fan of having an opportunity, maybe biannually or quarterly, where people can just talk to council and actually get answers to the best of our ability in the moment. And the only time I can think that I've ever experienced that, and Jody, Councillor McKay, you will have as well, and also Councillor Elliott, was when we did the MPS and we were at Acadia, and it was I think Devon and the mayor were responding. People were asking questions and there was real-time responses. I thought that was very good session, and certainly if the committee wanted to take that under advisement, having an opportunity, a real public listening and discussion with council, I think is a great opportunity. My thoughts. Councillor Madeira Voss.
I don't disagree that that was a great opportunity. I attended that session and I really appreciated, but it was very focused and it was on one topic.
Yeah.
What we're talking about here is regular meetings, and
I know.
some of the time, the stuff on the agenda is pretty.
So I didn't say it was for regular meetings. I thought to have a public listening session with council biannually or something would be.
Sure,
would
but
be
that would be an
a different-
add-on policy. That wouldn't
That's a
be
different
part of
policy.
this
a
policy.
different process.
Yeah.
But it is a chance. We don't very often have a chance to, except one-on-one, have real dialogue with
Yeah, no,
residents. I think it's good.
I agree that that's so it's worthwhile considering, but I think I don't think it fits with this particular policy.
So just before I go to Councillor Ingham, since we're going to have a motion, this has not been clarified. It sounds like you could have 10 minutes at the beginning of cow and the way it's written, and 10 minutes at the end.
I can certainly add some clarifying language, and just so that I'm clear, I believe the intent was 5 minutes at the beginning and 5 minutes at the end if you wanted to come back.
Okay.
So I can.
That was the intent.
Yeah. Because we did actually talk about, we don't need to have one at the end, according to the MGA. We talked about that. And then the discussion was, well, what if they listened to the whole council meeting and they had questions like a follow-up? So that's why we included it. I see your point on having, a biannual meeting with council. We just have to be really careful on that, because where do you have it? And then, how many people are going to be attending on it? And then is it going to be every little issue that they're going to be coming, and how long is it going to be? So I think we did actually talk about that too. I think Rob made reference to some of that in the past of other places that you've worked. So I just think if that is a policy, that would have to come in its own policy and not here. Yeah.
I often think around budget, it would be, I'd really like to have a dialogue with residents.
I feel like I had 3 conversations this morning on my dog walk. So
Yeah. I know.
feel like I'm pretty available almost all the time. So
But as a council.
yeah,
Not
no,
a
that's
fixture.
true. I think you also have to remember when you're coming in, people are going to gravitate to 1 or 2 people anyway, right? So, yeah.
Councillor McKay?
Yeah, I think clarity on the 4.3 is exactly what Councilor said, was before and after. Recognizing the fact that if someone sat for that long, it would be fine. And I agree. I don't think, I'm a big fan of open houses, what I would call an open house. We had it during the NPS when we had all the boards up to. To me, that was the best one I've seen. I think that was the most interactive, the most information sharing, everything that we've had. I don't know that we need a policy for that. I think we should just be doing open houses and saying, come on in and see us whenever we want to as a group. And yeah, budget and anything else, but just open the door.
Okay, we have a motion. I'm just going to put that up. We do?
It's on motion.
Oh, we didn't.
Didn't make it, but.
No, we have a motion to be put on the floor if somebody would like to do that. Councilor McKay?
Thank you.
Is that where your light's on?
Yes, please. I would move that committee of the whole forward the following motion to council for decision. That council approve the amendments to public input policy 110-010 as outlined in RFD 017-2024 with the clarification to 4.3 in the policy to say before cow and after cow.
Right at the end. Seconder, Councilor Madera Voss, is there any other discussion on that item? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That's passed unanimously. And we have time for one more, I think, before lunch. The presentation to council policy.
Okay, so this is a new policy, and as Councillor Ingham alluded to earlier, it's regarding folks coming and actually presenting to council. And we just wanted to sort of give some guidelines around that, because in the past it had been, those folks had come in through a variety of different avenues, whether through staff, the CEO, or to council directly. So we wanted to sort of provide those guidelines so that everyone kind of knew there was a process and what that process was. It focuses on what kinds of things may come before council. It focuses on the time limits around that, and also the communication, so that one of the concerns that we heard was that council oftentimes don't know who's coming until they actually sit in this chair. So we want to try and address that as well, and create better communication.
Okay.
I have a question. on
Yeah,
this one.
go ahead,
Uh,
Councilor McKay.
So I can't exactly find where I'm looking for it now, but it was under, my concern was when CIO and the town clerk will receive the information in collaboration with the mayor will decide the appropriateness of the subject matter. And then as your council members are informed of the details of the request. I just want to make sure that it isn't solely one or two people's discretion of what we see and what we don't see, because I thought we had added council in there as well. Because then it becomes, let's say it was a topic that you two didn't want to listen to, which is whatever that might be, I don't know. But if two people decided no, and then I'm going out to lunch at the same time, someone goes, do you know, you said no, you didn't want to hear what I had to say. And I would probably go, I have no idea what you're talking about. And that wasn't, so I'm curious about the flow of that. Because I had thought we had said something that council would be informed, or that something in between there, so that we're all informed of what was coming to the table, what was not being presented, and what was being presented is important, but
I
what's
thought that-
not being
I saw
presented
that
is
in
also
here.
important.
It's in there.
Oh, where does it say that? Informed of the details of the request. Yeah, the ones we get to see or the ones we don't get to see, or both. That's where I'm unclear. It doesn't say, it almost says that the mayor and the CIO will decide, or town clerk will decide what we're seeing, and then we'll get the details.
Yeah,
That's the way it reads. That's the way it read to me. So I wanted to make sure that one, if there was a request, that all of us saw the request, because we could all decide, no, we don't want to see it, but I don't think one person or two people should decide, yes, this is what we want to see, or say no, and then we don't know either. I'm
Yeah.
the non-blind side. I don't want to be blindsided
Yeah,
by things like
think
that, so.
you're correct, and that wasn't the intent, and yeah, I can certainly change the language here. I think it was more to do with the fact that at the regular meetings, because we meet with the mayor every week, then it would be discussed anything that had come up. But
Right.
certainly we can change the language around that.
Yeah, because
I think it was just simply language, not necessarily intent.
Yeah.
I think it was what it's.
somebody like to put that motion on?
Go ahead.
Councillor Ingham? Go.
I would move that committee of the whole forward the following motion to council for decision. That council approve policy 110-015, presentations to council policy as outlined in RFD 018-2024.
I'll second that.
Councillor Butler, thank you. Any other comments or questions?
You have to say with clarity on the language on section 5.2.
With more clarity on the section in 5.2.
Second that. I'm sorry, I meant to ask a question. So I'm going to do it now.
Do it now, we're discussing.
Yeah, we'll discuss it. Somewhere in here it talks about budget requests. Can we assume or add more clarity that I'm assuming budget requests will come in the context of the budget? So if a funding request comes to us next week and it's already, or let's say in June, budget's been passed, is there, I'm assuming the process is we'll refer that to the next budget year unless it's something that fits into a pot that already exists. But when I read it, I thought if somebody comes in June and is asking for funding for a community oven in June and they need it for July, there's a process of saying, you know, this has to go to budget because we have some policies around financial requests.
Yeah, and I think as well, that this might have been, although the terms in there, I believe it was also in relation to their own budgets, like if they wanted to give information on their own projects and what their budget was like, or.
So not an ask,
Not
but an
no, 'cause
update.
that, I think that's in there under funding. Under something separate, the funding requests was a section there.
Okay. I wonder if that can be clarified as well, just to say it's an update on on budget received and that people will be told, you know, if it's appropriate to present now, but it's still going to the budget process.
Sure.
That
Yeah.
wasn't my understanding
No?
of our discussion. No, funding request was someone coming in because the discussion came up, I think, Rob, when you said we used to do a whole day and people used to come in and ask for their funding requests, and we said, right, which we said we didn't want to do that. So we said funding requests were that, but and they get 15 minutes and get added to the discussion. So for instance, we had Brian from Acadia, was finished from Acadia come in. That was during the budget process. We also had them come in at another time and ask us for funding in July or August, I'm going to say, for the pool at one other time, which we didn't refer to the budget process, but that is at our discretion. We get to decide if we're referring it to the budget or we'll entertain a presentation because they were going to close it if we didn't give the money. So we gave the money. So I think
if CFL might have been one of the ones that just came out of the blue.
Yeah. So I think the funding request is just a funding request. They'll get 10 minutes and and Rob CIO can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's up to us to make that decision if we're going to entertain it or defer. Okay.
Okay. And that doesn't include the funding requests that go automatically to various things that council, you know, that go to Nick or.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, okay. All right, Councillor Madeira Voss. All right, so we have a question. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That's passed unanimously. We still have a few minutes. Let's do the flag flying policy amendments.
Do you want me to move that for discussion? Okay. I would move the committee of the whole for the following motion to council for decision. The council approved the amendments to the flag flying policy number 120-006 as outlined in RFD 019-2024.
Seconder, please.
I'll second that.
Councillor Butler, is there any discussion? Councillor Palmer?
I guess it's a pet peeve of mine, so I'd like to have this added to this policy that we be notified of why the flag is lowered. Specifically
It's in there
for everything, for
in the new one.
the why, and we're gonna notify us. Did I miss it? Okay. Good.
See, your wish is our command.
I missed it.
We all forget, we all.
Yeah, no, I hate that question. What's the flag down? Nobody is.
Deputy Mayor.
I had a question a couple of years ago from an ex-military resident of Wolfville who was looking at how the flags were hung and thought they were not according to military protocol. And I couldn't answer that question. I certainly didn't know who to even talk to on staff about that. So
Oh, sorry.
The issue was literally how it was hung.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay,
Good.
Counselor
right.
Butler's offered to answer that.
Clarificate how it was hung? Can you go into more, like, why is it not upside down?
No.
Or, okay.
Just that, the knots and I forget if we had two on the flagpole at that point. Can't have two. I don't know. I just didn't know who to talk to.
I mean, and,
I ended up calling Greenwood. and-
okay, yeah,
And got an answer.
okay.
But I don't know if there's something out there in the universe that this is how to do it right, because.
All I know is any government issued flag would only have one knot, which I believe is in the top corner as to where that's supposed to go on the flagpole. If you just buy them in a store, they don't come with that type of thing. So it's up to the person to know how to hang it correctly. There were times when the pride flags hung upside down because they forget the way the colors are supposed to go. Because when you buy it in the store, there's no knot because it's not a government issued
Right.
flag.
Right.
Oh, so the knot goes at the top.
Some people are fussy.
Other comments? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That is also passed unanimously. We still got 6 minutes.
Let's do the next.
Okay, we'll keep going. Repeal of town and gown policy.
Okay, so this is not part of the work plan
No.
for the council task force, a council review policy task force. This was just some housekeeping that I came across, and actually it should have probably been in front of you before now, but I'm asking that this policy is repealed because the MOU basically covers everything that's already in here. And I believe this policy was actually created in 2017 and the original MOU was 2018. So it should probably have been repealed then and wasn't.
Right. Somebody like to move that? Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
I would move that council approve the repeal of policy number 120-012, the Wolfville Town Acadia gown policy.
I can second that.
Seconder, thank you, Councillor Palmer. Any comments or questions?
Just seconded.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
For the record.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That's passed unanimously. Still got 4 minutes. Okay. Staff?
And then she's like, I'm
Well, she's got it.
If you're ready.
It's a long one too, isn't it?
I always have to get this one every.
That's because you chair it.
I can't wait for this budget.
Yeah, I put it, if you could put it on.
Oh,
It's in there? It's
Like-
in the special, yeah. It's going to take a minute. Just it's easier than Congress.
Better press that policy twice. That's pretty easy.
You were just tired after the 165-page report.
Well, in fact, I did read it after his report.
Yes, I am.
I started to.
I don't believe.
This one here.
We gave it to student. Beautiful.
You can do that. I think it's one of these. Is that? Oh, I don't know. Is that? There you go.
Hello.
When you're ready.
So I'm putting forward an RFD for the 2024 spring debenture. The spring debenture, there's certain requirements through the MGA, the Municipal Government Act, sections 87 and 88, to submit a capital budget, which we've done and council has approved. And the spring debenture will apply to any previously.
We haven't.
No, prior budget.
Prior budget.
Prior budget.
Last year.
So, sorry. Woo! So we, every year we present a capital budget for the previous years, prior to 24-25. Those budgets have been approved. The debenture is to facilitate long-term funding for those completed capital projects. We have to obtain approval for borrowing, which has gone through council with the temporary borrowing resolutions in 23-24, and there's 2 of them that were approved. And then we ask that council make a motion to draft to have a motion for the spring debenture to be approved, and we present it to the minister for ministerial approval. Points for today is the debenture is managed by the Nova Scotia Department of Finance. It used to be the Nova Scotia Municipal Finance Corporation. The deadline for the spring debenture this year is April 25th. So we have to have it decided upon and presented and signed prior to that date. Our requirement is to confirm the municipality's intent to borrow, which is what we're participating in today. And it requires resolution for council. The 2 temporary board resolutions that were put forward in 23-24 by my predecessor, Director McLean. One was for the town for a total of $2.5 million. It encompassed 4 projects. Of the 4 projects, we're only looking at the project for Fairfield Street, complete rebuild, and the East End culvert. The other 3 projects have not been completed. Hence, if you look at the amount of requested debenture funding is less than what the TBRs were, that's why. The secondary debenture was for the water utility, and it's for water transmission lines from University Avenue to Skyway Avenue. That's not been completed. That's going to be carried forward into the new budget, hopefully. And the secondary one was for water distribution for Fairfield. Fairfield again was completed, so we're asking for the 39.9. Total debenture request is for $774,900. For the town, we've completed both Fairfield and the East End main culvert. Total cost incurred to date is just slightly over $1.3 million, almost $1.4 million. We have other funding coming through the gas tax and the water utility, leaving the net result for long-term financing at $735 for the town. The full amount of water distribution for the Fairfield Street, there was no other funding for that, and we're asking for the full amount for the 39.9. The draft motion put in front of council is that they approve the attached resolution for the 774.9 borrowing at a maximum interest rate of 6.5.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Okay. I would move that committee of the whole forward the following motion to council for decision. That council approve the attached resolution for pre-approval to participate in the spring debenture issue with the following maximum financial parameters. Fairfield Street rebuild and East End main culvert, $735,000, 30-year amortization, asterisk. Water utility, $39,900, 30-year amortization, asterisk. Total borrowing amount, $774,900, asterisk, meaning maximum average interest rate is to be set at 6.5%.
Thank you. A seconder, please. Councillor Madera Voss. Are there any questions of staff? Comments? Councillor Palmer.
How do we know what the maximum interest rate is going to be in advance?
Very good question. That's actually something that Director McLean had discussed with me. And previously it was 6% last fall, and it comes out through the Department of Finance to give us those average rates based on the debenture application.
Okay.
No other questions? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? It's passed unanimously. Now it is after 12, so a half hour, is that good? Okay, we're adjourned for lunch.